Sometimes a mother's intuition can save a life in just 5 minutes. In my case, it was the moment between my son telling me, "Don't embarrass me tonight, Mom," and watching him collapse to his knees in front of everyone at his college graduation party. What happened in those 5 minutes didn't just change our relationship, it saved his life and exposed a dangerous secret he'd been hiding for months. Everything seemed perfect that evening, until my son James did something that made my mother's instincts scream danger. He kept checking his phone every 20 seconds, his hands were trembling, and when I tried to touch his forehead, his skin was ice cold despite the warm restaurant. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I didn't know that in less than 10 minutes, I'd have to choose between my son's pride and his survival. Before we dive into this story, please hit that subscribe button and comment below what you think could make a son go from dismissive to desperate in just 5 minutes. Your support helps me share these important stories. Let me tell you about the people in this story. James is 23, brilliant with a full scholarship to medical school, but his fatal flaw is his desperate need to handle everything alone without ever asking for help. That pride nearly killed him that night. I'm Linda, 52, a registered nurse who's worked in emergency rooms for 15 years, but nothing prepared me for what I'd face with my own son. Robert is my husband, 54, a high school math teacher who believes in giving our kids space to make their own mistakes, but that night, giving James space almost cost us everything. And then there's Dr. Patricia Williams, a family friend who happened to be dining at the same restaurant and became the key to saving James's life. Giovanni's Italian restaurant was filled with celebration that Saturday night. James had just graduated with honors from his pre-med program, and we'd reserved their private dining room for family and close friends. The room was beautiful, with warm lighting and the smell of fresh garlic bread filling the air. James looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit, the one we'd bought him for job interviews. He was getting congratulations from everyone, his professors who'd driven down for the celebration, our neighbors, even his old high school teachers who'd come to support him. This was our pride and joy, our son who'd overcome so much to get here. But I've been an ER nurse for 15 years. I know the signs when someone's body is in distress. And my son was showing every warning signal I'd learned to recognize in the emergency room. His complexion was gray, almost ashen. His pupils were dilated despite the bright restaurant lighting. Most alarming of all, he kept excusing himself to the bathroom every 15 minutes, and each time he came back, he looked worse. "James, honey, you haven't eaten anything," I said, noticing his untouched plate of chicken parmesan, his absolute favorite dish since childhood. He forced a smile. "Just nervous about the big celebration, Mom. You know how I get." But this wasn't nerves. As a nurse, I could see the difference. His breathing was shallow. His skin had a slight blue tint around his lips, and when he reached for his water glass, his hand shook so badly he nearly knocked it over. "Are you feeling sick? Do you need to go home and rest?" I asked, genuinely concerned. That's when he snapped. In front of everyone, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't embarrass me tonight, Mom. Please, I'm fine. Just stop treating me like a patient and let me enjoy my graduation." The table went silent. Even his grandmother, who usually had something to say about everything, just stared. In 23 years, James had never spoken to me like that, especially not in public. Robert reached over and squeezed my hand, giving me that look that said, "Let it go. He's stressed." But every instinct I had was screaming that something was dangerously wrong. I tried to respect James's wishes. I really did. For the next 20 minutes, I forced myself to smile, make small talk with the guests, and pretend everything was normal. But I kept watching my son out of the corner of my eye. He wasn't just nervous, he was deteriorating right in front of me. During the toast, when everyone stood to celebrate his achievements, James had to grip the back of his chair to steady himself. When his best friend Michael started telling a funny story about their college days, James's laugh sounded forced, almost desperate. But the moment that made me abandon all pretense of not embarrassing him was when he excused himself to the bathroom for the 4th time in an hour, and I saw him stumble slightly as he walked away. I waited 30 seconds, then followed him. The men's bathroom was at the end of a long hallway, and as I approached, I could hear sounds that made my nurse's training kick into overdrive. Someone was retching violently, but it wasn't normal food poisoning. This was the sound of someone whose body was rejecting something toxic. I knocked on the door. "James, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. God, can you just leave me alone for 5 minutes?" But his voice was weak, strained. And then I heard something that made my blood run cold, the unmistakable sound of someone collapsing. I didn't care about embarrassing him anymore. I pushed open the bathroom door. James was on the floor, barely conscious, with vomit down the front of his expensive suit. But what terrified me wasn't just seeing my son like that, it was what I found scattered around him. Small white pills, some dissolved, some whole, a prescription bottle with a name that wasn't his, and a small plastic bag with what looked like crushed tablets. My son, my straight A, med school bound, never even drank in high school son, was overdosing on prescription drugs. "James, James, look at me." I dropped to my knees, immediately checking his pulse. It was rapid and irregular, his breathing shallow, his skin was cold and clammy. "Mom, please don't," he whispered, barely able to form words. "Don't tell them. They can't know." I grabbed the prescription bottle, Adderall, but it was prescribed to someone named Michael Chen, his roommate. The bottle was nearly empty. "How many did you take?" "James, I need to know how many pills you took tonight." He tried to sit up but immediately collapsed back down. Just a few. Wanted to stay awake. Study for MCAT prep. But then I couldn't stop. Needed more to focus. My medical training took over. This wasn't just about tonight, this was about months of abuse, and his body was finally giving out. Before I tell you what happened next and how we managed to save James's life, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notification. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because what I'm about to tell you could literally save a life. The warning signs I missed could help another parent recognize a crisis before it's too late. I had two choices: run back to get Robert and create a scene in front of everyone, or handle this myself and risk my son's life if I was wrong about how serious this was. But as I really looked at him, I realized this was far worse than I'd thought. His lips were turning blue, his breathing was becoming more labored. And when I checked his pulse again, it was jumping erratically. This wasn't just an Adderall overdose. He was going into cardiac distress. "James, what else did you take?" "I need to know everything. Right now." He was fading in and out of consciousness, but he managed to whisper, "Energy drinks, lots of energy drinks. And coffee, and..." He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and showed me a text conversation that made my heart stop. The messages were with someone named T, and they were discussing study aids and performance enhancers and stacks that would help him stay focused for 72 hours straight. My thousand de Villiers. Son wasn't just abusing prescription drugs. He was combining them with massive amounts of caffeine and who knows what else, all in the name of academic performance. The last message, sent just an hour before dinner, read, "This combination will either make me a genius or kill me. Worth the risk for med school." I called 911 immediately, despite James weakly pleading with me not to. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Linda Peterson. I'm a registered nurse. My son is experiencing what appears to be a stimulant overdose combined with cardiac irregularities. We're at Giovanni's restaurant on Maple Street. I need paramedics immediately." "Ma'am, is the patient conscious?" I looked down at James, who was now barely responsive. "Barely. Pulse is erratic, approximately 140 and irregular. Respirations are shallow at about 25 per minute, and he's showing signs of hyperthermia despite being cold to the touch." While I waited for the ambulance, I did what I could with restaurant napkins and water, trying to cool him down and keep him conscious. But I also had to face the horrible reality that Robert and our guests were probably wondering where we were. I couldn't leave James, but I also couldn't let Robert come looking and find us like this without any warning. Just then, Dr. Patricia Williams, our family friend who'd been at the dinner, appeared in the hallway. She'd noticed we'd both been gone for a while and had come to check on us. The look on her face when she saw James on the bathroom floor told me everything I needed to know about how serious this was. "Linda, how long has he been like this?" "I found him about 5 minutes ago, but I think he's been building up to this all evening. Patricia, he's been abusing stimulants for months. His body is shutting down." Dr. Williams immediately knelt down and began her own assessment. "We need to get him to a hospital, now. This level of cardiac stress in a healthy 2-3-year-old. Linda, this could be fatal." The paramedics arrived within 7 minutes, but it felt like hours. As they worked on James, stabilizing him for transport, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I could protect my son's reputation and make up a story about food poisoning or the flu, or I could tell Robert and our family the truth and risk destroying everything James had worked for. But as I watched the paramedics hook James up to a cardiac monitor and saw his irregular heartbeat displayed in jagged lines, I realized that keeping his secret could kill him. When Robert came looking for us, I told him everything. Right there in the hallway, with James being loaded onto a stretcher, I explained about the pills, the prescription bottle, the months of abuse. The look on Robert's face broke my heart. But what he said next surprised me. "I wondered why he'd lost so much weight," he said quietly, "and why he was always wired, even late at night. I thought it was just stress from school." As we followed the ambulance to the Carden Interindate 18-9 G9, a hospital, Robert told me something that made the whole picture even clearer. "Linda, our bank statements showed some weird charges over the past few months. Small amounts, but frequent. I thought maybe he was just buying coffee and snacks for late-night studying, but now we know he was buying drugs," I finished. In the emergency room, as doctors worked to stabilize James's heart rhythm and flush the stimulants from his system, we learned just how close we'd come to losing him. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician, explained that James's blood showed dangerous levels of multiple stimulants. His body weight had dropped 15 pounds in 2 months. His liver was showing signs of stress from processing toxic combinations of drugs. "If you hadn't found him when you did," Dr. Chen told us, "he would have gone into full cardiac arrest within the hour. The combination of substances in his system was literally poisoning him." James spent 3 days in the hospital. During that time, we learned things about our son that shattered everything we thought we knew about him. The pressure to maintain his perfect GPA for med school had driven him to try Adderall just once during finals freshman year. But what started as a single pill to help him focus had escalated into a dangerous addiction over 2 years. He was taking up to 6 pills a day, combined with energy drinks, coffee, and even illegal stimulants he'd bought online, all to maintain the image of the perfect student. The night of his graduation dinner, he'd taken what he thought would be one last dose to celebrate, but his tolerance was so high that he'd essentially poisoned himself. When James finally woke up enough to talk coherently, the first thing he said was, "Mom, I'm so sorry I told you not to embarrass me. You saved my life." On his second day in the hospital, James and I had the conversation that changed our relationship forever. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be completely honest with me. How long have you been planning to stop?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the 4 in his hand. "I wasn't planning to stop, Mom. I was planning to get better at hiding it. I thought if I could just make it through med school, then I'd deal with it later." "James, you almost died. Your heart stopped working properly. Do you understand what that means?" He nodded, tears starting to form in his eyes. "I understand that I've been lying to everyone, including myself. And I understand that if you hadn't followed me to that bathroom, I would have died on my graduation night." That's when he told me the most shocking thing of all. "Mom, I wanted to tell you so many times. Every time you asked if I was okay, every time you tried to take care of me, I wanted to just break down and admit that I was drowning. But I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing you and Dad after everything you'd invested in my education. The irony was heartbreaking. In trying to protect our pride in him, he'd nearly killed himself. James's graduation celebration became the night that saved his life, but it also became the beginning of the hardest year our family had ever faced. He voluntarily withdrew his acceptance to med school and entered a rehabilitation program specifically designed for students with stimulant addictions. It was a 6-month program that taught him how to manage stress, study effectively without drugs, and deal with the pressure he'd been putting on himself. The hardest part for me wasn't the treatment or even the medical bills. It was learning that my son had been suffering in silence for 2 years while I thought he was thriving. How did I miss this? I asked his counselor during a family therapy session. I'm a nurse. I see drug abuse every day in the ER. How did I not see it in my own son? Dr. Martinez, his addiction counselor, explained something that changed my perspective completely. Linda, high-functioning addicts are often the hardest to identify, especially when they're our own children. James wasn't failing classes or getting arrested. He was succeeding beyond everyone's expectations. That success masked his addiction, even from a medical professional like yourself. During James's recovery, our whole family learned things that I wish I'd known years earlier. First, academic pressure can literally kill. The need to be perfect, to maintain impossible standards, can drive young people to make decisions that seem logical to them, but are actually life-threatening. Second, the warning signs of stimulant abuse are often mistaken for dedication and hard work. Weight loss, insomnia, mood swings, social isolation, we'd explained all of these away as normal stress from a demanding academic program. Third, the conversation about drug abuse needs to include prescription medications, not just illegal drugs. James had convinced himself that because Adderall was prescribed medication, it was somehow safer than street drugs. The reality is that prescription drug abuse can be just as deadly. Today, 18 months later, James is healthy, drug-free, and back in school pursuing a degree in addiction counseling instead of medicine. I realized that becoming a doctor to help people heal wasn't worth destroying my own health, he told me recently, but helping people who struggle with addiction like I did, that feels like the right path. He speaks at high schools now, sharing his story with students who are facing the same pressures he experienced. The kid who was embarrassed by his mother's concern now openly credits me with saving his life. But the most important change is in our relationship. James calls me every day, not because he has to, but because he wants to. He's learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. And I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to be dismissed when their instincts are screaming that something's wrong. The sophing night James collapsed in that restaurant bathroom, I learned something that every parent needs to understand. Our children's pride is never more important than their lives. James went from telling me, "Don't embarrass me tonight," to literally being on his knees, fighting for his life, in less than 5 minutes. But those 5 minutes taught us both that real love sometimes means ignoring someone's wishes in order to save them. If I could go back to that moment when he asked me not to embarrass him, I would do exactly the same thing again. Because embarrassment is temporary, but death is forever. If you're a parent watching this, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong with your child, even your adult child, don't let their pride stop you from investigating further. And if you're a young person struggling with pressure to perform, please know that your life is worth more than any grade, any acceptance letter, any achievement. Before you go, please subscribe to this channel and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me, what warning signs do you think parents should watch for? Your engagement helps these important stories reach the people who need them most. The most important lesson I can leave you with is this. Sometimes the best way to avoid embarrassing your child is to save their life first and worry about their feelings later. Because a living child who's temporarily embarrassed is infinitely better than a perfect child who's gone forever.